This is Sports Talk with Phil Kornblut and Chris Bergen. Sports Talk is heard across the state on radio affiliates of the Sports Talk Media Network and is streaming live on sportstalksc.com, as well as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. The South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number to call in is 888-898-2525. That's 888-898-2525. Now, here are Phil and Chris with tonight's edition of Sports Talk.
No Phil and Chris tonight, but you do have Smitty back with you as we are cruising. We're trying to get this paper boat off unmoored and off to sea all week without the help of Phil and Chris. I'm Matt Smith, and guiding you through all the sports news and everything that is happening. South Carolina, Clemson, Coastal Carolina. We've got news out of the Citadel and Charleston Southern, and a little more detail on the coach that was, it turns out, forcibly removed from the University of South Carolina's football coaching staff yesterday. But at the top, I do want to mention, maybe you've been, not working this week, procrastinating, which is just kind of working and going through the motions right up until the 4th of July hits. Maybe you've got the cooler ready to go out. Maybe you have got the lawn is already mowed from the weekend before. You've got your big plans, your favorite koozie in hand. But there is serious business. It wasn't a fever dream. Clemson and Florida State are suing the ACC, and it is coming to a head and may come to a head by the end of next week, which is why we will have John Blau of the Post and Courier join us. He's been boots on the ground reporting from Mecklenburg County courthouses this week as Clemson and the ACC attorneys are going head-to-head, and you won't believe some of the stories that are coming out of this courthouse, including the ACC attorneys comparing Clemson to a character from Casablanca, which is a great film, and it was kind of a mic drop moment for the ACC attorneys, but it's somewhat convoluted. The ACC is suggesting that, hey, Clemson, you knew that you were locked into this grant of rights deal. Jim Clements, your president, was on the board. You knew that you could be sued because you were part of the faction that was suing Maryland and tried to get some of the money back as they were exiting the ACC and on their way out to the Big Ten. All of that's right for the ACC, but Clemson's attorneys are framing it as if, hey, that's not what this discussion is about. We're not saying that we didn't go in with our eyes open to the grant of rights deal. We're saying the grant of rights deal will be null and void once we're no longer a part of the ACC. And, of course, the ACC would argue, you can't just walk away from this deal. You're part of this deal. Part of the reason ESPN cuts us a check every spring is because we have Clemson football and Florida State football and North Carolina basketball and Duke basketball. It has nothing to do with Boston College or Syracuse, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get back to it. It wasn't a fever dream. It's happening. It's a divorce, and it's getting ugly. Some great details came out yesterday, and we'll rehash some of that, and we'll get smarter tonight with John Blau. I know, look, we won't go to summer school tonight. I know it's the night before the 4th of July, and we're checking out. So we can just open our minds. We will be curious tonight, but not judgmental. We're going to have 3 intelligent people join us tonight, especially in their fields. John Blau, Post and Courier. We'll also have the money coach, Fran Halloran, for those that are listening on our flagship, The Point Radio in Columbia. He was on today sitting in for Kevin Cohen, and Fran Halloran has a tremendous handle on what the future may hold for college athletics because of what they're up against. Because now the NCAA in college athletics is in the capitalistic world. Now they have been forced into the sunlight, and now they are going to have to find a way There may be collective bargaining. Players may eventually try to form a players' association, similar to what we see in Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA in our country. And if they do that, that means they could bargain both collectively and then individually. And I will tell you, school presidents, and for what we know about the conference commissioners and from the sweetheart deal that the networks have gotten in the past in dealing with those presidents and conference commissioners, they're not equipped. They are not equipped. And so all of this is changing fast. And what role does Title IX play in the future? So those are questions that Fran Halloran can help take us through step by step, what has happened and what may happen. And he was on a few weeks ago, and he spoke with Phil and Chris about the role that private equity may play in the future. So, look, I know some of those terms, I don't want to give you a headache. That's why I say we will do this slowly. We'll wade in together, and we'll just learn a little bit by talking to intelligent people. Another one of those intelligent people we will speak with tonight is Major Billy Downer. We'll talk about safety over the 4th of July weekend, especially near and around the water. Every year, tragic stories come out after holidays. Every year, the DNR has some tragedies to report. Often there's a body count. Let's be better than that. We all know it's 6 o'clock or 10 after 6 now, the day before 4th of July. Let's pledge to each other to treat our neighbors with kindness, and part of doing that is to do our due diligence when it comes to safety. We'll have that discussion coming up at the bottom of hour 2 with Major Billy Downer as well. All right, let's get to some news notes tonight. Some things that are happening and some stories that we had yesterday, but today we know a little bit more about. P.J. Dozier, you may remember him, former Gamecock. He's a free agent, but he has now agreed to a one-year deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Dozier returns from a season in Europe after a torn ACL with the Nuggets in 2021. Boy, it seems like so long ago now. Also, this news out of Coastal Carolina, thanks to federal and state funding, about $10 million total, there will be a pedestrian overpass spanning South Carolina Highway 544 coming to the campus of Coastal Carolina, or just across the campus of Coastal Carolina over there near Brooks Stadium. More details on that as they are revealed. Now, we have this news, this little nugget. We told you yesterday Taylor Edwards was removed as one of the coaches, director of player personnel, under Shane Beamer with the University of South Carolina. We now know, per Mike Uva of Gamecock Central, that Taylor Edwards was fired by the Gamecocks for a violation of athletic department policy. Now, I want to properly credit everyone and this information as I get it. I don't have what I can tell you is I have it on good authority at this moment. What we believe to have happened is that Edwards contacted a player that had not yet entered the transfer portal. That is not Mike Uva. That is me. That's reckless journalism. But I will reveal our source as the night goes on, as soon as I can get confirmation on that. But it appears that is what happened. So will there be any repercussions there? We don't know, because it seems that Shane Beamer and the University of South Carolina took swift action in removing Taylor Edwards. So look, in this era of NIL and the transfer portal, there's still things you can't do under the NCAA regulations, and one of them is contact a player that is not yet in the transfer portal. And it appears that's what Edwards had done. Now, this is, to me, my favorite story of the day. I always like when our in-state teams get together, share the field with each other. The Citadel and Charleston Southern announced earlier today that the school's football teams will establish an official label for the long-standing rivalry between their Charleston-based programs. It will be the Low Country Boil Bowl. So August 31st of this year at Buccaneer Field, 6 o'clock, the Citadel will kick off at Charleston Southern. The annual contest will feature the program squaring off for a trophy filled to the brim with Low Country Boil. I hope okay. They're really doing that? All right, reinforcing the victories, both the Hardware and Seafood Fest are presented to the victor following the conclusion of the game. What I like is I went to the Citadel's website for this story, the citadel.edu, and of course then they went on to explain Low Country Boil, which I don't think I have to do here. And a story we didn't talk about yesterday, TNT Sports, which recently you may know lost its NBA rights, but they still have a lot of sports programming coming to TNT Sports, and one of them is Mountain West Football. Has reached an agreement with TNT Sports, and it's going to begin this season. Here's the crazy thing. I'm going to have to look up, like, mountainwest.com to find out who's still in the Mountain West. Where is everybody right now? My eyes have been glued to what's happening with the SEC and ACC and Big Ten payouts. What's the Mountain West up to right now? And you know what? I may not be the only one. I can tell you, I read a story earlier today on ESPN about Oklahoma and just kind of the things that happen, the details where you have to dot I's and cross T's when you move from one conference to another. So Oklahoma long been a part of, the Big 8, and then it was the Big 12 forever. That's where Oklahoma had been. Well, now they noticed, oh boy, on our campus around the stadium here, we've got to have more flags, because if we want enough flags to represent all the teams that are in the SEC now, the part of the conference we're a part of, plus have an American flag and plus have, like a state flag, we've got to have more flagpoles. So they're dealing with that. And look, why do I bring that up? That's not a story. That's just a shrug, right? Oh, okay, well, everybody does that. You have to do that, right? Here's the thing. TCU's not doing it anymore. TCU's given up on it. TCU has been in the Southwest Conference, the WAC, Conference USA, Mountain West, and then elevated, if you can say that, elevated to the Big 12. They've given up. They took the flagpoles down at TCU. At TCU, they're just going to put a graphic on the wall. No more flags. I just pulled the story up at ESPN.com. Horned Frogs Associate AD for Facilities says, I'm just putting a graphic on the wall. I'm not going to add in flagpoles for this year. Who knows if we're down to 8 teams in 4 years? It doesn't make any sense. I'm taking them all down. I'm putting graphics up on the brick wall in the north end of the stadium. It is what it is. TCU, one of those teams that's kind of been jerked around as they've been fighting their way forward. Again, Southwest Conference, WAC, Conference USA, Mountain West, and then finally the Big 12. And, of course, then teams are exiting the Big 12. It's barely considered a Power 4 conference. That is, unless the ACC splits in half over the next 6 weeks, and some of the lifeboats are headed toward the Big 12. So TCU is right. Don't put up any flagpoles. It could change. It could change in the snap of your fingers based on what happens with Clemson and with Florida State and those court rulings, which right now they are holding court in Mecklenburg County. Then there's an open court case in Florida where Florida State is suing the NCAA in the state of Florida. And then you have Clemson, which has already filed against the ACC in Pickens County. 3 states, 3 entities. Tell me when it gets weird. And because each of those courts has its own independence, one state can't overrule the other. It may be where we're going is you could have conflicting rulings, and the U.S. Supreme Court, the famous U.S. Supreme Court, the one with Alito, all that, something that you hear talked about on political shows by political talking heads and pundits and discussing what they're doing and what their rulings are going to look like about presidential immunity or abortion. they may have to come down, roll their sleeves up, and call Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC to Washington, D.C. That's where this could be headed. We'll talk to John Blau, Post and Courier, about that a little bit later. For me, it is sad. I'm one of those people, I keep likening this to a divorce. I wanted Clemson and the ACC to work it out. I think we're better. I think we're just better in college athletics if the ACC is strong and it has teams like Clemson and Florida State. But this isn't your uncle's ACC anymore. Flip on the tube this fall. SMU playing at Chestnut Hill against Boston College. Is Syracuse playing Cal? I don't know. Have we got Stanford, Wake Forest playing each other in something other than chess? It's getting weird out there. It's getting weird. So we'll have fun with it tonight. 888-898-2525 is the number. I'm your host tonight, Matt Smith. As I said, Sports Talk by the Sea. I'm here in coastal South Carolina. Let's go to those phone lines. I think we've got Gamecock Larry standing by. We'll squeeze that call in before our first break. Am I right, JP? Is Gamecock Larry with us?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Larry.
How you doing, sir? I got a question. Somebody said something about a Gamecock transferred to Georgia. Have you heard anything about that?
I have got. Let me look at my in my notes. I will have to get right back to you after the break.
Okay,
I will find out. We do it. There have been two transfers in the last couple of days. I know Kyler Horton. I can tell you that one off the top of my head. That one sticks out. That he transferred to South Carolina State. We mentioned that last night.
Okay, well, okay. Anyway, we don't want. They got Musgrave from us, so we don't want to send no more up there. Bobo. They got about 4 or 5 ex-Gamecock coaches up there, so we don't want to send no more help to them. But I just want to. Oh yeah, my drag racing team and my motocross team. They leaving on the 8th of July, going to Bristol, Tennessee, and they're going to be up there about 8 or 9 days in the drag racing and drag racing and motocross racing. I know all them I've seen that motocross driving them cars and things. If it ain't got 4 wheels, I ain't riding. But I just want to call. I want to wish you all have a good holiday. I want to wish all my Clemson friends and all of you, all my Clemson friends. You say you don't like the old Gamecock, but you know deep down you do. So deep down I love you. Tiger Bryan, all you. Tiger Bryan, have a good holiday and be safe. Take it. Eat. I guess I just want to say hello to you all. No, y'all. I enjoy talking to you, and I know you don't like to listen. Old Gamecock started rattling and all that. They say you got dementia. You ain't got good sense. I'll tell them I ain't got. I ain't crazy. I ain't got good sense. Don't worry about it. Old Gamecock Larry, I'll be 90 years old in 28 days. Oh, yeah, while you're there, Smitty, I know you're busy and never down around Columbia, but if you're ever down here on August the 3rd, they having something, they call it drop-in or something. If you're down this way, it ain't got to be on August the 3rd. Down this way, anytime, you can drop in, say hello, talk to the old Gamecock, make him feel good, and I'll be in my recliner. You can drop in, I'll be in my recliner. I ain't going outside. I love all y'all. Have a good holiday, and Tiger Bryan. Keep on going, buddy. I love you both. Buddy, I'm sorry. I'm just all crazy. Go Gamecocks. Go Tom. Nope. I'll
No.
talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. And happy 4th of July to you, Larry. And look, you mentioned August. By the way, good time to remind everyone, if you are coming to the coast at any point this summer, James Smith Realty is your hookup. Paulie's Vacation Rentals.com. Paulie's Island is the place. Jimmy Smith is the man. Call Jimmy today at James W. Smith Real Estate, 843-237-4246. That's 843-237-4246 for your perfect beach getaway. I'm telling you, it's worth the trip. If you come down to Paulie's Island, go by, see Jimmy. He's got, if you're a sports fan, he's got tremendous sports memorabilia up there, and he's got stories about anyone that's coached in the last 40 years at Clemson or South Carolina, and all the notable athletes that have come through. He's got a lot of photos up there, a lot of footballs, signed helmets. So just go on through there, speak with Jimmy. He'll have a story for you, and he'll work hard to get you a place, the perfect place, by the beach. All right, let's bring JP in. I cut you off again last night, JP. We keep doing that, so let's do it early tonight. Yesterday, the big story. JP's our producer this week. He's also the producer for our Friday night high school scoreboard show, which is coming back this August for football season. And JP, I cut you off a little bit last night. We ran out of time. Good guess last night. But I wanted you to jump on again, and you said, look, ESPN has no one to blame but themselves. They wanted Clemson and South Carolina to move the rivalry game from Saturday to Black Friday, and that's one of the things that's been revealed in this court case between Clemson and the ACC. And you said, boy, the ESPN is asking a lot. A lot of this is their fault, right?
Yeah, it's them trying to reconcile with the fact that they destroyed a lot of the traditional Black Friday rivalry games. You think about Black Friday, college football, you think Nebraska, Colorado, Mizzou, Kansas, NC State, North Carolina, Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, Arkansas, a lot of those. And so, some of those are still around, like, North Carolina State, tremendous rivalry, love it a lot. But most of those aren't. Texas A&M making a comeback. Are they playing their game on Black Friday this year? I know it's on rivalry weekend, but I don't know if it's
question.
I don't know if it's back on Friday.
If that's back on Friday. That's a really good question. All right, I'll look into that while you finish your thought.
And so it's once again ESPN bulldozing through what we love about college sports and then making it other people's problems to pick up the pieces. And they just did it to the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl, which for a lot of people, and I don't think this is necessarily that hot of a take, people like the Egg Bowl more than they like watching the Detroit Lions and Chicago Bears play on Thanksgiving and stuff like that. The Egg Bowl is on Thanksgiving Day. It's the only it's the only rivalry game that's ever played on that date, and it captures the attention of the nation. It's one of the greatest rivalries we have in college football, and they're moving it off of Thanksgiving because they need stuff on Black Friday, because these artificial games, like, after Texas A&M left to join the SEC, they had Texas play Baylor on these last, on these Black Friday rivalry weekend games. They had Nebraska play Iowa. They have Mizzou and Arkansas facing off. These artificial rivalries just aren't doing it. And so now they're messing with other rivalries. And I just can't stand it when stuff like this happens. And it's only happening more and more in college football.
Something we'll talk about tonight. We'll bring it up with Fran Halloran coming up in hour number 2. But when we get back after this break, we're going to have John Blau join us, Post and Courier. He's right at the epicenter of a lot of this controversy. Clemson and the ACC. And, of course, John, unbiased observer. So this is a good opportunity to just get nuts and bolts about what's happening and how the case may be going, and if either one of them has a legal advantage at this point in the proceedings. We'll talk about that with John Blau when we come back. This is Sports Talk. Welcome back to Sports Talk. Final night before we take a break for the 4th of July. I hope you have plans, whatever you're doing, celebrating America's independence and celebrating the great Americans that have come before us and, hey, that we share our time with right now. It's a good day to be patriotic tomorrow, however you're going to celebrate that. John Blau from the Post and Courier has decided to celebrate this week by taking his laptop up to Mecklenburg County, and it's been hard news, unfortunately, for John. What a week for that, John. It's a strange time, right? It's 108 degrees outside almost everywhere, and yet here you are probably wearing long pants going to a courtroom in Charlotte.
Yeah, I wore jeans. I didn't get too fancy. But, we're listening to arguments about jurisdiction and sovereign immunity and all kinds of interesting stuff. I mean, the ACC's attorneys did make it interesting by playing a clip from the movie Casablanca, which I didn't expect to see in a courtroom, but that was interesting.
You know, John, maybe you could help us with this. I won't go through everything, but I do think there seems to be an argument for the ACC. And part of it plays around that the Casablanca clip, which they played, which involves a local French police captain who says, "Oh, I can't believe there's gambling here," and then they hand him his winnings, almost as if it's all happening in front of you. You know, one thing, let me lay out the ACC's case, essentially, and then you tell me where it is that Clemson is trying to poke holes in it. The ACC is suggesting, hey, this grant of rights deal, you, meaning Clemson, Jim Clements, you were a part of it. You were part of the driving force in the negotiations with ESPN. And the fact that we wanted to do this deal was not only because we were trying to get you money for the foreseeable future, it was also because we were trying to keep the ACC intact, which is something you were fully on board with at the time. And you were one of the schools championing, let's get it a long-term deal. This way nobody goes anywhere. And then you want to change the rules midway through just because the SEC and Big Ten have lapped you and got such better deals. So it sounds like the ACC, they're not servicing Clemson by saying these things, but it does seem like, at least legally, they have a case.
Yeah, but again, going back to that Casablanca clip, it was actually in reference to the fact that, the winnings, quote unquote, that, are handed to Captain Renault, are similar, they say, to the winnings that Clemson took from when Maryland was sued by the ACC. I mean, they got an exit penalty distribution. And so obviously they knew that they could be sued for trying to do the same thing. And they're almost, what the ACC's attorneys are saying is almost like they're pleading ignorance that this might happen or should happen. And then, going back to President Clements, I mean, the ACC's attorneys also did that. They flashed a giant picture of Jim Clements on stage with John Swofford, the ACC commissioner, and a representative from ESPN, showing the fact that, these were not passive people. I mean, Jim Clements was literally the head of the board that, agreed to this thing. And so, the ACC certainly seems to have a really strong case. Obviously, Clemson's trying to get an interpretation of the grant of rights, which, again, people can be kind of cynical about or kind of question why they're doing it now, obviously. But that it doesn't specifically, if you look at the contract language of the ESPN deal, the grant of rights, say that into the future necessarily means if we go to another conference that we can't have our rights back, which, most people are going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. But, they're trying to say that the language itself doesn't preclude that in terms of, yes, you own the rights of the games that we played in the ACC. You can run replays all you want on the ACC network. But you don't own our rights when we leave and we're no longer a member of this conference. So, if you wanted to take a side, I think the ACC's side, if you wanted to be a lawyer for a day, I think it would be easier to argue their case. But obviously, again, there's just so much money at stake. Clemson really wants this to happen, so they're going to get some lawyers that can kind of create another argument, a novel argument that maybe creates a little bit of a loophole that can kind of distress the ACC a little bit and maybe negotiate an exit penalty that's a little bit smaller than $140 million.
You know, John, you've obviously been reporting on Clemson the last few years, and now this is like a divorce, and the marriage has been rocky for a while. So you knew all of this was bubbling below the surface. You're probably like me. You're hearing things, and then it starts to get real, and now you're reporting on things that are legitimate. I mean, it's out in the open. And to me, like a divorce, one thing about it is where this is headed, if one of the parties doesn't want to be in the marriage anymore, I don't think there's any way that it's going to work out, right? I mean, at this point, I don't see any half measures or compromises. Even if the ACC wins a string of cases, really what that's going to mean for, say, Florida State and Clemson, I believe, is the price tag just gets higher. There's just more pain that they'll have to endure to buy their way out of this. But at this point, do you see any way Clemson's in the ACC, say, 4 years from now or 5 years from now?
Yeah, not unless there's some miracle where, the ACC is able to get Notre Dame or something like that to actually become a full member, and all of a sudden their, distributions just rise, by 100%, they double or something. I don't think it's happening, because that's the whole issue. Obviously people can think it's a little shallow, but they don't want the Clemsons of the world that want to compete at the highest level of college football, don't want their rival South Carolina getting an $80 million distribution when they're getting about 50, just because there's such a gap there in terms of what you can pay your coaches, the sports you can run, and obviously this revenue distribution issue coming with the House settlement. You need to have the money. And so, I don't think that circumstance is going to change. And so at the end of the day, if that's not changing, Clemson has to try to find a way to get to one of these two power conferences, either the SEC or the Big Ten, which is going to pay them that amount that allows them to stay competitive with others. So, I don't think it's changing. I mean, Graham Neff forever in public has been saying, when he's asked about the ACC and what he's doing for Clemson, said, we're looking out for Clemson. We're not, at the end of the day, we're going to do what's best for us. And this is just an extension of that, obviously a much more public and much more messy extension of that. But, we knew this was coming for a while, and now we're kind of in the beginning of the end, I guess I would say, in terms of playing out Clemson eventually leaving this conference.
You can follow John Blau's reporting on Twitter at John_Blau, and then you can link to all of the stories from there at the Post and Courier. John, I want you to be able to clarify this too, because I said this yesterday, and I don't know, maybe I didn't realize people were going to be confused about it, but essentially Clemson released the email from the ACC office that was directed toward Graham Neff about trying to move the game between South Carolina and Clemson to Black Friday. So maybe you can go into that a little bit. That was the bombshell from yesterday. I didn't think it was going to be confusing because I thought it made ESPN look awful. I thought it made the ACC look awful, but you know how social media runs with things. So maybe you could take this opportunity and clarify why Clemson released that email and what your thoughts were as you kind of picked through it.
Yeah, I think some people thought reading the email, well, this looks like it was phrased in a certain way that the ACC was trying to lay out how bad Clemson was being, and they wanted that out there. But no, what it really is that Clemson filed a memorandum in opposition to the ACC's motion to dismiss the case in Pickens County. And basically what the Clemson was arguing in this memorandum is that a South Carolina court should have jurisdiction because ACC does significant business in this state, and part of what they included was an affidavit, a sworn affidavit from Athletic Director Graham Neff talking about all the facilities that the ACC gets to use, not only for obviously the home football games of Clemson that they broadcast, but all the championship events that Clemson has hosted, all of the content that ESPN's allowed to use Clemson's facilities to produce, and then also the ways in which the ACC and ESPN can dictate to Clemson, this is this is where you're going to play, and this is what time you're going to play, what day. And even when the schedule's set, we're going to come back and say, oh, never mind, we want to move you to a different day. And so they attached that email as kind of a piece of evidence to back up Graham Neff's sworn affidavit to show that, yeah, this is the level of control that ESPN and the ACC exerts on Clemson, which is a university in the state of South Carolina. And yes, this court in South Carolina should have jurisdiction because they're obviously doing a whole lot to affect kind of what we do and when we do it. So, I think, again, a lot of people thought that maybe the ACC wanted to use this to kind of slander Clemson for refusing to do all this. But at the end of the day, Dabo Swinney's made the point himself. He doesn't like playing Saturday games. I mean, he had his kids playing high school football. He wanted to go watch them play high school football on Fridays. He's one of those big proponents of that. And so, yeah, Graham Neff at the end of the day said, no thanks. Yeah, we're not doing that. And obviously, again, it fit into a piece of kind of what Clemson's trying to do right now in terms of arguing over jurisdiction and trying to keep the case in South Carolina.
Yeah, and I was surprised, actually, the ACC worded it that strongly because, to me, what I said yesterday after reading that was, boy, what's the ACC doing? Their commodities are Clemson football, Florida State football, North Carolina basketball, and Duke basketball. And that's actually gets me into the next question I wanted to ask. What are you hearing? If Clemson and Florida State kind of have the ability to flex and muscle their way out of the ACC. If that were to take place, what other dominoes then do you believe would fall? Because I don't know what's being reported, say, in North Carolina and Virginia, but I cannot imagine the ACC could stay together as it's currently constructed with those Tobacco Road schools, knowing that they won't have Clemson and Florida State bringing in that football money. Do you know anything, or are you hearing more innuendo around what might happen if this comes to pass in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, it's all speculation at this point. I mean, I haven't heard definitively that there's an invite from here, an invite from there. I mean, obviously did hear, maybe bringing in SMU, Cal, Stanford. That was in part because, the ACC is bracing for the possibility they could lose some schools. And obviously there are 18 teams deep right now, but it could go back again to 16, 15 if you start losing some of these schools. Obviously, we've heard the rumors about, geographically, Florida State and Clemson fit the SEC, but does South Carolina want Clemson in the SEC? Would South Carolina even have a voice in that? At the end of the day, in terms of the way this thing's going, just in a broader sense, geography and breaking new ground is part of this. Obviously, the Big Ten went from the Midwest to the East Coast to the West Coast. They don't really have that southeastern quadrant yet. Does the Big Ten want a school like Clemson maybe and Florida State maybe a little bit more than the SEC even would because it breaks new ground? Would the SEC want a Virginia and a North Carolina because that breaks new ground? Again, it's all speculation at this point. We don't have a hard evidence of any of this, but there are going to be many dominoes, once this whole thing kind of does start to fall. Obviously, Clemson and Florida State bring their lawsuits, kind of tries to put that in motion and knock some of those dominoes over. It's going to be an interesting situation to see kind of what actually does unfold. I mean, the Big Ten, again, I brought up that scenario, but Clemson doesn't have AAU status. That's important to that conference. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen. There's more questions than answers at this point in terms of what will happen.
All right. Again, at John_Blau, BLAU, reporting for Post and Courier. And trust me, this fall, John and I will both be covering football again. Okay, that'll be fun. We'll see each other at the field, and he won't have to do this anymore for a while. And that's the final question for you, John. What is the timeline now? Because I know you've been tweeting about that as well, that the judges are trying their best to work inside a timeline. When do you think we get some kind of resolution, some kind of answer? In other words, if you're a Clemson football fan out there, they're like, look, I kind of want to know what conference we're going to be in 2 years. When do you think any of that will start to crystallize?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still hard to know. I mean, we do know in terms of the jurisdiction arguments, which is kind of the opening phase of this, that Judge Bledsoe in Charlotte, he's going to try to offer a written opinion on what he believes should happen with the Charlotte case. That's going to happen midweek next week. Judge Gravely in Pickens County, with Clemson's case there, he's going to hear some arguments on the 12th of next week, and so there'll be kind of more arguments there, but he won't necessarily rule from the bench. He'll probably then take his time and offer an opinion on whether that case should continue. If you want to look to the Florida State example, both the Florida and North Carolina cases in that one continue are both going on, and that's probably going to be the case with Clemson. I don't think that either of the courts are going to throw it out. And so that takes you through July, and then there's going to be appeals, and that's August, September. I mean, this is probably going to go all the way through football season, unless, again, at the end of the day, the ACC or Clemson experiences enough defeat or just feeling like not very good about their case that they feel like this is just better to settle. Then maybe you could have some movement, but I don't know if that's coming, in August of this year, or if it's going to be August of next year, or how long. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to take more than a year or two at the longest. But it's definitely not to be resolved within the next month or so. I'd be very surprised if it was.
Well, not what I wanted to hear, John. So that's it. We'll try to. Boy, what sour news delivered the day before 4th of July. And we'll end on a high note then. All right, I saw in your bio you grew up on Rocky films. Me too. When I'm not feeling it, my go-to Rocky montage is Rocky IV, in the snow, in Siberia. I can't help but go, if I don't feel like going to the gym, that gets me there. What's your go-to Rocky moment?
Adrian, just do one thing for me. Come here, whisper, win. It's just like the goosebumps every single time. Love it.
Oh, that's Rocky II. That's Rocky II.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
No,
all right.
They're all great for their different reasons, I would say.
Yeah, except for the fifth one, which never happened. All right, that's it.
No, it never happened.
Never happened. Not real. All right, thank you so much, John. Try to relax a little bit, and we'll see you on Twitter, and then we'll see you at the stadium this fall covering football.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
There's John Blau. We've got to get to a break because we've got the Seawells recruiting report. Oh, that was bad news from John. This could be hanging over our heads for 24 months. The wheels of justice can turn slowly. I'd like some resolution before then. All right. So, again, we'll talk about this more on Friday. Right now, recruiting report coming up next. Recruiting battles between the Gamecocks in Georgia, Gamecocks in Tennessee, all that next.
I'm attorney Jim Corbett. That's the sound of a big hit on you and your car or truck. I've been an attorney for more than 30 years, helping people who get injured in car wrecks and truck wrecks. If you have serious injuries, call Jim Corbett, 803-765-2968, or email me at jim@jimcorbettattorney.com. That's Corbett. I don't get paid unless I recover for you. Jim Corbett Attorney, for your best recovery from a big hit, 803-765-2968, or jim@jimcorbettattorney.com.
There's a lot of things we take for granted in our lives. Your home's AC will run cool. Your drive-through coffee will be hot. And the car will start when it's time to take your kids to school. It's when things don't go as planned that you start thinking about who to call and where to turn. The good thing is, you can prepare for life's most difficult days by calling the Larry Lucas Agency today. Larry is a State Farm agent that has been taking care of people across South Carolina for more than 2 decades. You probably have insurance, but switching is easy, and bundling can save you hundreds or more. Most importantly, the Larry Lucas Agency can help you choose the protection you want at the price you want. All backed by South Carolina's #1 home and auto insurance company. Visit LarryLucasAgency.com today or give Larry a call at 803-799-1998. Like a good neighbor, Larry Lucas State Farm is there.
Hi, this is Major Billy Downer, and coming up tonight at 7:30, it's another edition of SC Wild from the Department of Natural Resources on the SportsTalk Media Network.
If you're looking to stay hydrated this summer, turn toward a southern favorite, sweet South Carolina watermelons. One slice is equivalent to a glass of water and is just as effective as sports drinks for hydration. If you don't believe us, you can ask the Palmetto State's top football teams. The SC Watermelon Association will be serving up slices after summer practice to keep our teams fueled and hydrated. Visit scwatermelon.org for all the details and look for ripe South Carolina watermelons in your hometown.
The South Carolina Education Lottery has a new rolling jackpot, and trust me, our state hasn't seen anything this big before.
How big? Harbortown Lighthouse big?
Bigger.
Bigger than the Ravenel Bridge?
Even bigger.
Not bigger than Table Rock.
With this new rolling jackpot, Palmetto Cash 5 is officially too big to ignore. Palmetto Cash 5 draws nightly, so play today. Check if your numbers are winners in the Players Club app or at sceducationlottery.com. Overall odds are 1 in 10. Top prize odds are 1 in 850,668.
George Bryant here for Tsunami Bar Sports, and some say the fun is in the winning. I say the fun is in the training. And Tsunami Robbie, what do you say?
George, we all know you get more done when you're having fun. This technology is different, it's engaging, but it's also a lot of fun to use.
Hi, this is Phil Kornblut. Be sure to click on the digital ad on SportsTalkSC.com and get 5% off any Tsunami Bar order using promo code BBB5. Don't wait, order today.
The Sports Talk Recruiting Report is sponsored by Seawell's Catering.
Recruiting Report presented by Seawell's tonight, July 3rd, 2024. I said South Carolina versus Tennessee. Well, let's start there. Safety Lagonza Howard of Lyons, Georgia, said last night he's narrowed his list to the Gamecocks and Tennessee as he eyes his July 27th commitment date. Florida and Georgia were the other two on his short list, but they didn't make the final two. Hayward said he's not yet made his decision as he goes back and forth between the schools. He's hearing regularly from both staffs. From the Gamecocks side, that means head coach Shane Beamer, defensive coordinator Clayton White, and secondary coach Torian Gray. Hayward said, been keeping in touch with them on a daily basis. Coach Beamer and Coach White, they are really just conversating. Hayward visited South Carolina for a spring practice, and he made his official visit the second weekend in June. Hayward said, I'm really liking it, basically how they develop players, talking to the strength and conditioning coaches. They know the ins and outs, so they can develop you. Hayward added, however, that Tennessee had been recruiting him longer than South Carolina. Last season, Hayward had 48 tackles with 4 passes defended and 3 interceptions. He also played offensively, catching 26 passes for 727 yards and 7 touchdowns. Jaden Breaker, which is a linebacker out of Snellville, Georgia, 6'4", 214 pounds. He said last night he is planning to make his commitment announcement sometime this week. Breaker said he has narrowed his decision to South Carolina, NC State, and Utah. He made official visits to those 3 along with Utah and Kentucky. Breaker said he has not yet made up his mind and is hearing from all 3 schools. He talked with Gamecocks linebackers coach Clayton White Tuesday last night. They've been keeping touch, checking in on me and everything. Same old stuff, Breaker said, making sure they keep themselves in the game. The coaches know what they are doing. Breaker added that Clayton White is pushing 2 major reasons he should come and play for him in Columbia for development, and it's SEC ball. Reminder, Breaker is considering South Carolina along with NC State and Utah. Breaker also visited USC for a spring practice, and it was after that visit he picked up his offer from the Gamecocks. South Carolina target offensive tackle Juan Gaston of Atlanta has set August 2nd for his commitment announcement. He's down South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Oregon. Georgia is viewed as the favorite. One-time Gamecocks target linebacker Tavian Wallace has committed to Arkansas, so Gamecocks will not be getting Wallace's commitment. Former USC receiver Kylie Horton transferring to SC State per Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. We mentioned that in last night's show as well. Carlin Newman, defensive back Frederick Gillens, committed to Appalachian State. 2026 quarterback Javon Gilmore of Gaffney named a top 5 of Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. He plans to announce his commitment July 28th. And 2026 wide receiver Jordan Gidron of Ridgeview plans to name his top 12 schools on Friday. So more recruiting news coming out on Friday. Reminder, we're off tomorrow. Go enjoy your family. Celebrate independence here in the United States of America. The freedom that we all enjoy. We could celebrate that tomorrow, perhaps with margarita. But then we'll be back on Friday, rolling our sleeves up, doing the work. Speaking of work, we've got the money coach, Fran Halloran, coming up on the other side. We'll talk about money in the landscape of college football and college athletics next.
Welcome back to Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network. You can reach the guys with the South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number, 888-898-2525. That's 888-898-2525. Now back to Phil and Chris with the second hour of Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network.
And welcome back to Sports Talk, final hour before the 4th of July break. Matt Smith is here with you. It's Sports Talk by the Sea for tonight, and then again on Friday before Chris gets back. And I may jump on with Chris a little bit then, so I hope you're not tired of me. I hope you know different style than Phil, who's a bit more of a curmudgeon. I'm more of Tommy Bahama T-shirts, laid back, open-minded, love to have these discussions with guests like we had in the last half hour, John Blau. Not that Phil's not – wait a minute, no, Phil's not open-minded. No, I don't want to take that back. But some of the same discussions we have with Phil Kornblut, some of those I have behind closed doors that you aren't privy to. Maybe one day he'll write a memoir and we'll share all that. But love to have writers like John Blau on, who is right there covering in Mecklenburg County the court case between the ACC and Clemson. Unfortunately, he didn't give us any good news. I think this is going to be hanging over our heads for a while now. Maybe we can spin this conversation in a positive direction with the money coach, Fran Halloran, because we're going to talk about the business of college athletics, and I think it's changing quickly. And as I said in the first hour to open the show, I don't think the NCAA was ready. I don't think school presidents were ready. I don't think conference commissioners were ready for the business of college athletics to change. Not only were they not ready, I think they're probably ill-equipped for the conversation. And Fran Halloran is not. So let's see, do we have the money coach with us?
Hey, Smitty, how are you, sir?
Oh, Fran, I know it's been a long day. You were filling in for Kevin Cohen today, and so you've already given your brilliance to everybody. So thanks for doing a little overtime with us. Yeah.
I can assure you that the folks who were listening to me during the afternoon drive would laugh out loud if they heard you talk about my brilliance on the afternoon drive. But thank you for the kind words.
Well,
I do the best
Coach,
I
you
can not
just
to sink the ship.
Yeah, you just make up for it now. But I love having these conversations with you because I feel like, you correct me if I'm wrong, you were somewhat excited because you have a background, obviously, in finance and financial planning, but also in coaching and working with young people, and you care about that. You care about athletics. So to see those two worlds merge a little bit, while there will be bumps along the way, I think you almost find it like what a fascinating petri dish this is for you to observe, right?
I do. And let me be brutally honest with you. I don't know that I'm going to have a whole lot of good news to share with you about this because I 100% agree with what you said a moment ago in the intro, that college athletics is not ready for this. And when I mean that, I mean the NCAA is not ready. They weren't ready for NIL, and that's been proven. They're not ready for private equity to become a part of college athletics. They're not ready for the business of college athletics. You see, universities have been, quote unquote, playing the business game for ever and ever, but they've been playing with house money. They've been playing with taxpayers' dollars and boosters' dollars. That's it. They've never had to be profitable. Once you enter into a relationship with private equity or let's just say capitalism in general, there's no more charity. There's no more, but we're improving. You will have essentially a situation where, just like in the business world, when you have a publicly traded company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the stockholders to be successful or you're out. And this is where we are headed. And I realize people are going to think, you got to be kidding me. This is not going to happen. It is going to happen because once private equity gets involved and they start investing in college and university programs, they will have more say-so than anybody else on the playing field. I'll give you an example of how powerful private equity is. I know a gentleman who owns a construction company, and he has private equity money in that construction company. And a number of years ago, the private equity firm came to him and said, we're going to pay this much money per unit, not a penny more. And you know what the owner of the construction company said? Okay, because private equity is funding everything he does now in his construction company. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. There's no, but this costs more or that costs more or this is going to be, there's none of that. Once private equity gets involved, it's their way or the highway. And colleges and universities are not ready for this because they have been essentially temples that are untouchable. I use South Carolina as an example. Ray Tanner, wonderful human being. My wife has had a relationship with his wife from her time at the university. The Tanners are fabulous people. He is not equipped for what is about to happen when the private equity firms begin to say, we want this to happen. We want this to be profitable. You're not getting it done. What's he going to do? So we're entering a brand new phase of college sports. College athletics, as we know it, dead. I hear Phil lamenting this all the time, but it's dead, Smitty. Dead, dead, dead. We may as well call what's coming the Association of Collegiate Professional Sports.
So, right, it'll be college athletics 2.0, and that's fascinating. So let me put a pin in it right there. This is Fran Halloran joining us here, the money coach, with a background in coaching. So he's somebody. He's not just schooling us on the financial side here. He cares about athletics too. So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. I would ask you this, Fran. One of the things that we have heard is coming is that players may be eventually they're going to be like labeled employees and no longer student athletes. And I would ask you, I just wonder, you just talked about how the NCAA essentially was cursed by prosperity, right? They had it so good for so long, they didn't know what else it was like. I would wonder if you were advising the players just as a collective, as a whole, would you tell them maybe to pump the brakes on that? Because aren't there also drawbacks to being an employee?
I would go so far as to say that the model you're going to see come to fruition is going to be very much like professional football. These great players are going to have agents. It's going to happen. It's going to happen very soon. And you'll no longer deal with player, mom, dad, uncle, auntie. You won't deal with those people anymore. You will deal with a professional agent who is schooled in negotiations and value for the asset. And that is going to really put college athletics in a quandary because, again, these coaches are not going to be equipped to deal with that kind of complication, if you will. A kid is going to have a great basketball player, a great football player, a great baseball player, a great softball player, because this is going to transcend across all sports. All sports. Olympic sports, revenue sports, it's going to happen everywhere. The investment that's going to come from private equity and capitalism is going to fund everything. It will never pass the smell test or a court test where we're only going to put this kind of money in men's basketball, football, and a few women's basketball programs or a great baseball program. It is going to filter down to every single sport. So I would, if I were advising players, I would already be talking to agent-type people who can represent my interest in some way, shape, or form, whether I'm doing it on the table or under the table. I would be getting my advice and counsel from someone who has a professional knowledge of the value of sport and the value of sport with me in it, if I was one of those great athletes that could command those kind of negotiations, if you will.
All right, now let's get to the part, which is, to me, the part that I think that most of our audience cares the most about. If you will, put your coach's hat back on, or the fact, hey, I like watching college football on Saturdays. When we watch those games and you see the collegial spirit, you know, when you see Penn State fill their stadium and have a whiteout, when you see Virginia Tech and Enter Sandman, when you see the tailgating scene on College Game Day on Saturdays, that's what we don't want to lose. And so far, to me, all the noise outside, NIL, transfer portal, everything else, court cases, between the lines, college athletics has still been great. College World Series was great. NCAA basketball tournament was fascinating. The college football season was as good as ever. So that's what we want to protect. So we need to make sure we almost protect the school presidents and players and agents and private equity, as you're saying. We have to protect them from themselves, because that part of it is actually what brings the value, right? That's why the networks will pay. That's why the universities will have money to pay players, and collectives will have money to pay players. So what would you tell them about treading perhaps carefully? What guardrails or safeguards would you suggest that we've got to keep the spirit of the game, because you've got to keep your eye on the ball if you're going to continue to have value?
Well, once again, it will come down to profitability, especially when private equity really enters into the fray. And private equity is smart enough to know that the product, in this case, the Saturday game day product, is not something they want to mess around with. Think of it from a business perspective. If I'm already creating the greatest widget in the world, but I want to accept more investment dollars from investors, those investors are going to say, we want the return on the investment. We don't really want to mess with your perfect widget. We hope that is the nature of the path, if you will, that is going to be forged forward. I can't say for sure that that's going to happen, because the ego factor is going to come into play even more so than it has with the onset of NIL. And there will be jealousy as well, because let's be honest, if you've got a quarterback playing in the SEC who's negotiated a deal with this college or university, and he's making $3 million a year as your quarterback, which is very possible, very possible. Remember what Matt Rule said last year: a great quarterback in the transfer portal, John, is going to cost me $1.5 to $2 million. So $3 million is not out of the realm of possibility, right? The punter, the offensive lineman, right? The long snapper, those guys, there's going to be some envy. There's going to be some jealousy, and that is going to upset the product for a time until we get used to the new norm, which, yeah, I'm going to college and I'm driving a 2001 Ford Ranger, and the guy that I'm snapping the ball to is driving a 2026 Maybach Mercedes. Things are going to change. Hopefully the product on the field doesn't change, but I would argue it's already changing. and there's nothing we can do about it. The genie is out of the bottle. And you mentioned television in an earlier segment having so much control. The control that private equity is going to have over college sports will pale in comparison. Excuse me. The television control will pale in comparison to what private equity will have. You mark my words.
That was the question I was going to ask. So let's use a real-world example. Fran Halloran, the money coach, joining us here on Sports Talk. A real-world example. The email that leaked yesterday was between the ACC office and Clemson, and what was happening was the ACC office was trying to pressure Clemson to move their rivalry game with South Carolina to Black Friday, and they were giving them all of these concessions. We'll do this. You'll be playing the Citadel at this time. You'll play a home game in Labor Day 2027. They were giving them all of these carrots and coming to the bargaining table. And what you were suggesting, if I'm hearing you right, is in the future when ESPN makes that call or sends that email, it will not just be to Athletic Director Graham Neff. There will be a private equity firm that will also be CC'd on that email, and they will have a seat at that table in that discussion.
100% correct. And that influence is going to be greater than the television network influence. Because private equity has already said, we're willing. And you got to understand the money involved in private equity. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars in some cases. Private equity has already said, we're willing to put $20 million to $200 million we're willing to inject that into a program right now, into multiple programs. They're not just giving that out of the kindness of their heart. They're going to expect return on investment. And that means they're going to want to control the background. They're going to want to see that the athletic department is being run properly, like a business and not like a 501c3 charitable organization, a la university. It's going to change everything. Hopefully the product on the field doesn't change, but I have every reason to believe that that's going to change as well. And I think one day there will be a completely separate division in college sports. There'll be, right now we have Division 1, 2, and 3. I don't think you're going to see this really, winnowing down to Division 2 and Division 3 sports, at least no time soon. So it could be that this Division 1 powerhouse group of college sports, they get to reap the benefits even more so than they are now. And the true Saturday afternoon 2:00 game between Furman and Georgia Southern is still going to be around to give us our fix, if you will, for the old days of college football or the old days of college basketball or baseball, whatever we're into. But things are going to change because anytime money gets involved, especially money at this level, there's no way for it not to influence every aspect of what is going on in that program.
And Fran, and I think maybe, you see, we're jumping off of the conversation you had previously a couple of weeks ago. I want to make sure everybody understands this, and I want to make sure that I understand it correctly. What you believe is the money will become so great, like you said, $2 million for a quarterback, to lure a quarterback, that at some point you've almost tapped out your current boosters, that you can't go back to Phil Knight for another dollar, that Walmart's not going to give Arkansas any more money for the next running back. At some point, the collectives are tapped. You've used all the money from the parking lot that you collected on Saturdays, and now you're going to have to invite like a Guggenheim or a BlackRock into the conversation, because if you want to continue to compete at the highest level and be Georgia or Alabama or whomever, you need an influx of cash, and you have to bring them in, or you won't be able to compete for championships in the near future.
Yes, but it won't be as well known as BlackRock or Guggenheim. But what it will be is someone who runs the Forest Fund, and the Forest Fund is housed in the same facility that BlackRock is in. And the Forest Fund is going to be BlackRock's independent private equity firm, and that's where you're going to see the influx of cash. And they will never be able to say no, because the race in college athletics has been on. The facilities race, for instance, has been on for the last 15, 20 years. Let's see who can build the bigger, better building for the football players, the baseball players, the basketball players, right? What we're about to see with the influx of private equity is going to make all of that look like chump change. I'm telling you that the dollars that will be injected into universities across this country will just spin people's brains. And as I keep saying, it's going to change everything, because they're not giving that money to a charity. At that point in time, it's no more the University of South Carolina Athletics Department. It is on the surface, it is in front of everybody, but behind the scenes, it's supported by private equity, and it's gonna filter down to the conferences. It's gonna filter down to the naming rights to conferences. It's gonna be the Rocket Mortgage Big Ten, right? It's gonna be I don't know, the General Motors SEC.
Oh, I can't wait.
Johnson to be everywhere.
Johnsonville Sausage presents Alabama Crimson Tide football Saturday. Oh no.
Yeah, it's going to change everything, man. And we are at the tipping point. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, but it's also going to be a little heartbreaking, because you mentioned this earlier. I'm an old coach, high school football for 12 and a half years. I loved every minute of it, and I love the purity of a Friday night under the lights. I love all the work that goes into it. But once money gets involved in anything, it changes the face of it all.
All right, Fran, we really appreciate you. We've got to go to break. Obviously, I'm going to have you back on, and we'll stay in touch on this, and we'll talk behind the scenes, and I'll bring some of your insight to the air. Thank you so much for the time, Fran, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure.
Now on Sports Talk, it's SC Wild with Major Billy Downer of the Department of Natural Resources. Major Downer is here to take your questions about the great outdoors in South Carolina. Give him a call at 888-898-2525. It's SC Wild from DNR on the Sports Talk Radio Network.
Time for another edition of SC Wild, and we have got Major Billy Downer joining us now just ahead of this 4th of July holiday. We're also going to have Officer Edwina Mathis join us. Major Downer, we'll start with you while we get Officer Mathis on the line with us. But 4th of July weekend, and so much to celebrate. But I know that you and at DNR and all your fellow officers, I know it also puts you on high alert, because safety's always at the forefront when we all get out as South Carolinians together.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Major Downer, you with us?
Hey, I lost you.
Hey, okay. All right, we've got you back.
Okay.
We got you back. We are good. I was just saying, Major Downer, I know that the 4th of July weekend, look, a great holiday, and what a great state we have with all of our waterways and lakes and opportunity to enjoy it. And I think we're going to have good weather across the state. But I know that at DNR, you have to be diligent as well and remind everybody, to take care of their neighbors when they're out there as well. I know safety is always on your mind when we talk about holidays.
So, yeah, we're in the July 4th week. Again, we're in the middle of what we call, the 100 deadly days of summer, and that's not to be negative. It's just to remind folks that the time, as we always say, between Memorial Day and Labor Day are the 100 most deadliest days on our waterways and our highways. So we partner with the State Highway Patrol, Department of Public Safety, and DNR partners together to remind our boaters, our people driving, to go to visit people, to have parties tomorrow for 4th of July, to celebrate, to be safe on the road and on the waterways. And our part, of course, is the waterways.
And our big part for us, it's about being safe in your boat, going to where you're going so you can come back and enjoy time at home again and to go back out again. So the things, we always talk about, this weekend is just very important because there are so many more people out there. Already tonight, I'm hearing a word from lakes, local lakes, just a lot of crowds gathering already. People getting ready to celebrate tomorrow. Because the 4th is during the week, sometimes that'll affect the number of people out there. It won't be quite as big a crowd maybe until the weekend because people got to work on Friday. But people are off tomorrow. They're going to be on the water. And for whatever reason, the 4th is that time of year when folks find the boat wherever they can and get on the water. Sometimes they pull whatever boat they can that they found from the neighbor or whatever else, and they haven't gone through it. The motor doesn't run right. They get stranded out in the water, and it becomes a frustrating day. So some of the things I want to remind folks, remember, go through your boat before you get on the water. Don't get in such a hurry on 4th of July to get out there. Make sure that you gas the boat up. You've got your oil like you need for your boat, for your motor, if it's not a 4-stroke. That you pre-mix the oil, all those things that you don't have a problem on the water. Make sure you've got life jackets. You'll always hear me talk about life jackets. Make sure you've got enough personal flotation devices for everybody in the boat. Make sure that they fit the intended user. So if you've got young children, make sure the life jacket will fit them properly. Don't put an adult life jacket in the boat and expect that to count for a toddler, 5-year-old, even an 8 or 9-year-old. Make sure it fits the intended user. We talked about this in the past, that the Coast Guard has changed the way they're marking life jackets. So if you were used to seeing type 1, 2, or 3, which was able to be used in a boat, now they are labeled by their flotation ability, so 70, 100, and 150. And then that is just a number that they're using now to be trying to kind of match up with Canada a little bit. Where the United States and Canada have a numbering system that makes sense. But so 70 is what used to be our old Type 3s. So if the life jacket says 70 inside and says U.S. Coast Guard approved, that's going to work, and that's going to be what we call a recreational or Type 3 life jacket. It's the kind you would wear if you're skiing, if you're being pulled on a tube, that will work. Your 100 is going to have more, it's going to float better. That's more what we call a near-shore device. And then the 150 is going to be like your Type 1s used to be, which were offshore, if you were going offshore. So the thing about South Carolina is we always talk about from the mountains to the sea. We have water from the coast all the way to the mountains in Jocassee Gorges. So there's so many different types of waterways that folks will go out in the water tomorrow. And, I typically talk about inland or lake systems or rivers and what you need to have there. But when you go on the coast, it's a totally different game. And have we got our guest with us tonight?
We do. We have Officer Edwina Mathis joining us as well, Major Downer.
Edwina, thank you for joining us tonight.
No, thank you, guys.
All right, well, I'm glad to have her. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little story about her right now. I went looking for a coastal expert, and I got informed by a long-time officer who has got years of experience. He said she is the new expert because I have taught her everything I know. So we're going to let Officer Mathis be our coastal expert tonight, and I expect nothing but the best information from her.
I appreciate that. I might not be quite the expert, but I'll do my best.
Hey, it's a vote of confidence, though. What a great vote of confidence for you. Inland waterways, I always talk about life jackets. I always talk about, make sure that you plan your trip, tell people where you're going so people know where you're going, when you expect to return. We always talk about float plans in boater education classes. We tell people about life jackets, your whistles, your registration card. Make sure your registration's right on the boat. You've got a fire extinguisher that works. You got the whistle or horn sound device. But on the coast, there's other things that people have to have sometimes. And I know that flares those type signal devices are required on the coast. Isn't that right?
Offshore, you got to have those on board. We tend to see a lot of boats inshore that have them on there because everybody's ready to be prepared. But we definitely suggest it because if you end up outside of an inlet, you're going to want something like that to show where you are.
Absolutely. So we talked about this before the show, but in coastal waters tomorrow, Charleston Harbor, surrounding areas, Ashley River, Wando River, all those areas, what's the number one violation that y'all see down there on a regular basis, particularly on big weekends?
So violation-wise, we have a ton of wake zones spread out all throughout the coastal area. And people tend to not really know and understand what idle speed is when they're going through those wake zones. So usually they end up with a ticket or a good warning because they're going on plane. They're either going on plane or they're plowing. And people think that plowing is idle speed, but it's a little bit too much. And if you look behind you and you see that white water, that means you're going way too fast. You know, idle speed, I always tell everybody the definition is just fast enough to have forward momentum and maintain steerage. And down here in the coast, that's pretty important because you might have the current pushing against you, so you got to give it a little bit more. So in terms of wake zones down here, it's never a set speed. It's just how the water's moving around you and how fast you can go against it.
Absolutely. So that's a great point. I want to highlight something you said because in our upper, in inland lakes, we have wake zones, of course. Typically, you see a wake zone, which is part of the non-lateral system. That's a white buoy with an orange circle on it, and it's going to say no wake. It's going to say no wake, in this area potentially. You see the words no wake. And we know that typically is around landings that have fueling facilities, public landings, areas of congestion. But on the coast, it's a little bit different. There's a lot more of them, and sometimes they can be extremely long, like Wapu Cut, for instance. I know, Adwina, you're familiar with that.
Yeah, you're gonna spend a good 45 minutes, and on a hot day, it's a long 45 minutes cruising through that wake zone.
Right, but it is what it is. It's there for reasons that we don't control. It's there. Our officers are doing, their job because the owners along that, trust me, they know it's a wake zone. And if you're not at idle speed, they're going to be calling, complaining, screaming at you from the side of the waterway, and they're going to make it known you're not following that rule. So it's a good point. Now, on the coast in wake zones, you got to really, really be paying attention. You will see some signs that aren't real. Adwina, let's talk about that for a minute, too, because on the same side of let's follow our wake zones, there are some areas where you'll see signs that say no wake, but they don't have a DNR sticker on them.
Yeah, so down here, we have a big issue with, is it my waters or public waters? And so people put stuff up on their docks that, it says no wake and it doesn't have a DNR emblem. DNR, we put out the no wake zone buoys that you can specifically tell it's from us, provided by us, but we also have responsible for your wake signs. And those are in areas where it might be a tight creek, so you've got 50 feet between you and the dock, which you should be at idle speed. But we'll give those individuals signs to put on their dock that just informs the boaters that, hey, if you're going to throw wake, you're responsible if it causes any damage. But those are the only kind of signs you're going to see down here. We've had people take buoys, no wake zone buoys, and put them up in a back creek. So if the buoy looks pretty derelict and it still has a DNR emblem on it, that's a little questionable sometimes where it came from.
Yeah, but that's a good point. So on the coast, and just like anywhere in South Carolina, so many people now are moving to our waterways, and they don't want a boat come by them, which is really not fair. But where there's areas of congestion, we have a system where we choose where no wake zones should be. As people continue to move to the coast, a lot of people want a wake zone everywhere they got a house. And it's just not possible because everybody doesn't want to take 45 minutes to go through a creek. And you shouldn't have to. But you are responsible for your wake if your wake causes damage when you're within 50 feet and 100 feet on certain lakes. Again, the rules change depending on the lake we're talking about. So you really need to look at your lakes, look at that, remember where you are. A lot of our inland lakes, it's 100 feet now, except for Lake Moultrie, it's where it's still 50. On the coast, a lot of times it's 50 feet, particularly in the intercoastal waterway, it's 50 feet, because the intercoastal waterway is very narrow. But one thing to remember, if you're traveling past the dock with a boat and you're 100 feet or close to that boat and you're dragging that wake and you cause damage to that boat, that landowner can come against you civilly for that. So that's the truth. So you do need to watch your wake, even in areas where there's not a no-wake zone. But the no-wake zones, particularly on these big weekends, our officers will be watching that because there's a lot of traffic. So good point to be made there. On the big waterways in the Charleston Harbor, Dwayne, any words of wisdom there for folks who choose to go into the harbor?
Yeah, absolutely. So anywhere in the harbor, you want to definitely check your tides, see where the tide's at. Is it falling or is it rising? And make sure you know your channel. From starting this job, I've always been told the best GPS is your eyes. So you can look down at your actual GPS and see where a marked channel is, but in the Charleston Harbor and surrounding parts, you got to make sure you're looking up and you're seeing, is there a new sandbar there? Have the waters moved? Is there something that's obstructing your path? So that's what we see a lot of boats in the harbor getting grounded during this time of year because people, they don't really know the channel and they try and cut corners, and next thing you know, they're on a sandbar and they panic. So that's the biggest thing, especially during the day, but 100% at night, because you get out in the Charleston Harbor at night and you're looking for channel markers and half of them are not lit up, and all of a sudden the Charleston downtown is drowning out any lights that are actually there. So we want to make sure that people know if you're navigating at night, one big thing is you can't run with a light bar on. You can only have your navigation lights on. That's on the bow of your boat and the stern of your boat. But you need to be paying attention and seeing where you are. Are there obstructions in front of you? Is there another boat moving around you or towards you? Do they have their lights on? Because sometimes you'll see a black mass going across the harbor, somebody running without lights, and that's the biggest danger we have out there. And I know on 4th of July night when we have fireworks out in the Charleston Harbor, once the fireworks are over, we make sure we have officers placed at certain channel markers that are going to get people home, and we'll have those lit up so people can make sure they're navigating the right way home and get home safely if they can.
Absolutely. So one thing to talk about tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, because I know there are fireworks shows throughout the state on our waterways, not only in Charleston, Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie, up in Kiowee, Hartwell, Lake Murray for sure. There's fireworks shows sometimes Friday, Saturday, tomorrow night, of course, then Friday and Saturday as well across the state. So a lot of people be out in the water at night, a lot more than normal maybe, people gathering in big groups. So your navigation lights are critical. Make sure that both your bow light, which is your red and green light, and your stern light or your all-around light, which is white, is working. If you have a pontoon and you've got one of those folded up, you've got your bimini top folded up, and your light is in that bimini top, make sure it's folded out where it can be seen and not up in all the folds so someone can't see that light. Because the most important light on your boat is that white all-around light, because it can be seen 360 degrees. Your bow lights are important because the red and green lets people know what direction you're coming from, and that can help them know who's got the right of way. When it comes to tomorrow night, most people have no idea about navigation, but make sure your lights are on. Doing a good point, no extra lights on the boat, as in like a big, these LED lights everybody wants to put on. They used to be called docking lights. Now everybody puts a light bar on the boat so they can light up the water. And a lot of people feel like that helps them see better. But in actuality, if you've been boating a long time, you know that when you cut with your navigation lights, and if it's a decent lit night, you can see better reflection on the water without that big bright light. that big bright light will blind people to not be able to see your bow light, first of all, and they can't sometimes, like a deer in the headlights, tell which direction you're going, and it causes more accidents than it helps prevent. So do not have LED lights on, these light bars, docking lights on, as you're traveling about the next few nights. Make sure your bow lights and your all-around light, stern light is working. Our officers will be out checking, and yes, they are there to write tickets if people don't have the lights on and give you some type of light if they have them to help you be seen so you can be safe and safely return home. That's just part of the job, and on these big nights when we have these huge groups of people out on the water, it's critical that people have lights so they can be seen. So that's a very good point. One thing I will say as an old game warden, I got taught 25 years ago, if you ever cross a wake on the water at night, start looking because something caused that wake. And a lot of times that can save you from running up in the back of somebody. If you cross a wake at night and you're not looking, there's a boat that caused that wake. Find out where that boat's at.
Absolutely.
Other than tides, good point. Tides are big. I laughed at myself last show. I talked about running a boat in the coastal areas at low tide so you know where your bars are. So when you come out of high tide, you can pretty much run and marking things. But you made a good point. So many things are constantly changing on the coast. Where on inland lakes, maybe you got a log that floats in. That's not as big a deal as a sandbar moving 100 feet on you, or sometimes 40 yards or whatever, and causing the whole channel to shift. And now you've got to learn a whole new route you may have been running all year, and then all of a sudden it changes after a big storm. But that's the coast, and it happens all the time. Any other words of wisdom for our coastal folks this weekend?
I kind of tell everybody, be as safe as possible. Keep your eyes up. We have a lot of boaters down here. They kind of get tunnel vision like they're in a car and they look straight, but you can't ever be too hypervigilant in a boat. Just watching what other people are doing, paying attention to what they're doing, because if they're not paying attention but you are, you might save a life. That's the biggest thing, is do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and keep others safe while you're out there on the water.
Any concerns? I don't talk about this much on the show, so I want to mention it while I've got your expertise with us tonight. How about shipping lanes in Charleston? How big of a concern is that over the next few days?
So shipping containers are coming in and out. We have a lot of small boats they'll anchor out in the channel. So if you're between a red and green buoy, don't drop your anchor out. We've seen people sunbathing out in the channel. They'll do that. But if you ever see if the boat's bigger than you, and that includes container ships, a sport fisher, or even if you're in a 20-foot boat and you see a 35-foot boat go by, always watch that wake, because that wake's coming off that boat, especially those container ships, and it's a lot bigger than you think by the time it gets to you. So you always got to be safe when that wake's coming off those boats pretty fast and it's moving towards you. But otherwise, it's pretty well regulated out there in the Charleston Harbor, and just make sure you're not getting too close to those container ships, because they're moving a lot faster than you think, and they don't have the maneuverability that you have. So always kind of steer clear of them if they're coming towards you, and if you can, just kind of go behind them instead. Don't ever cut in front of them.
Absolutely. That's good words of wisdom. Edwina, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're almost through for the evening, but I appreciate everything you said. I want to wrap up tonight, Smitty, with a few things just to remember. Again, we've talked about running lights. That's a bigger deal during 4th of July because everybody's out at night looking at fireworks shows. Make sure your running lights are working before you get on the water. Check them, recheck them. I don't know how many times I've been on a boat, we're checking a boat, its lights aren't working, and their first comment is, well, they were just working earlier today, or they just quit. Well, every boat you go to says that. That doesn't mean they were all telling the truth. But check your running lights. Make sure you got your safety equipment on board, your life jackets for everybody on board, fits the intended user, where you can get to them, and they're in good condition. Make sure your boat registration is good. Again, everybody trying to get out in the water, getting boats out there that maybe hadn't gone in the water this year yet, or maybe in a few years, make sure your registration's good. Make sure all your safety equipment's on board, your whistle, fire extinguisher. If it's required for you to have a fire extinguisher, make sure your fire extinguisher's in good shape. If you haven't checked it a while before you go out tomorrow and this weekend, check it. Make sure that it's in the green, that it's in good shape, because if you need it, it's not going to do you any good if it's empty and doesn't work. So that's the biggest tips for this weekend. We hope everybody has a safe 4th. We want everybody to, we want to have just as many people alive and well on Sunday as we do today. We don't want a boating accident, because safety is no boating accidents. So thanks for letting us on the show tonight, and I hope that folks have a great 4th of July tomorrow and a safe weekend.
Absolutely. Happy 4th of July to you as well, Major Downer, and tremendous tips. And, hey, stay hydrated out there, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be hot on the water, so make sure you got hydration out there. And we didn't talk about this, but I will mention on the way out the door, because we got maybe a minute left. Our officers will be out there enforcing our boating under the influence laws for sure. 4th of July is a time people like to celebrate. People like to have a beer on the water, and it's not illegal to have a beer on the water. What is illegal to do is to operate a boat under the influence. You notice I'm not going to say .08, because that's legally under the influence for sure. That's legally being drunk. But before .08, you can be under the influence. So if you're drinking, don't drive the boat. Get somebody else. Get a designated driver for the boat, just like you would a car, so that you can get out there, have a good time, and safely return back. Make sure the person you designate as driver of the boat knows how to drive the boat and knows where the safety equipment is, so that they can get it in case you need it. That's our biggest tips for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care of each other. And just as Major Downer said, take extra time tomorrow, making sure you have everything, registration, safety first tomorrow. Thank you so much, Major Downer. That's SC Wild for this week. And, hey, we're taking the 4th of July off. Maybe I'll be on the water, and I hope you're out enjoying South Carolina outdoors tomorrow. We're back with you on Friday right here on the Sports Talk Media Network.